Susan Sontag's ideas, from her 1977 book on photography, suggest that photography deeply influences how we perceive reality, acting like a window into the world that both educates and controls. She compares our reliance on photos to Plato's cave, where we see images as truth, not just shadows. This means photos teach us what to look at and what we can observe, shaping our ethics of seeing. While photos might seem like direct evidence, Sontag argues they're more like interpretations, shaped by the photographer's decisions. For example, documentary photographers choose specific images to tell stories, like poverty or dignity, showing photos aren't neutral but carry the photographer's perspective. Photography has become a mass medium, thanks to technology, letting anyone capture and share their world. This democratization empowers people but can also lead to a flood of images, potentially distorting our understanding. She warns this insatiability might overwhelm us, making it hard to find meaning in the visual noise. Her views stress photography's ethical role, influencing what we value and how we connect with the world. This is especially relevant today, with debates about privacy, consent, and AI-generated images challenging traditional notions of photographic truth. Sontag's ideas encourage us to think critically about the images we create and consume. On photography, Sontag offers a profound critique of photography's role in shaping human perception, knowledge, and ethics. Her insights, drawn from essays first published in the New York Review of Books between 1973 and 1977, remain strikingly relevant, particularly in the context of the digital age, AI, and social networking. This exploration delves into her views, analyzing their implications and connecting them to contemporary visual culture, providing a comprehensive understanding of photography's multifaceted impact. Sontag begins by invoking Plato's allegory of the cave, suggesting that humanity remains trapped in a world of illusions, but now these illusions are photographic images rather than shadows. She argues that being educated by photographs differs from older, more artisanal images like paintings, primarily due to their sheer number and apparent directness. Since photography's inception in 1839, just about everything has been photographed, creating an insatiability of the photographing eye that changes how we perceive our world. This proliferation alters our terms of confinement in the cave, teaching us a new visual code that expands what we consider worth looking at and what we believe we have a right to observe. This shift, she contends, is not just aesthetic but ethical, as photographs dictate the boundaries of our attention and moral engagement with the world. For instance, photographs serve as a grammar and, even more importantly, an ethics of seeing, suggesting they shape our cultural and moral frameworks. This idea is echoed in contemporary discussions about social media, where images of distant events, often shared without context, influence global perceptions and public opinion, raising ethical questions about voyeurism and consent. Central to Sontag's critique is the notion that photography is an act of appropriation, a way to collect the world. She states, "To collect photographs is to collect the world," emphasizing that each image becomes a tangible object. Lightweight, cheap to produce, easy to carry, accumulate, and store. This is vividly illustrated in her reference to Jean-Luc Godard's film Les Carabiniers, where characters return from war with suitcases full of postcards instead of real treasures, parodying the idea that photographs replace direct experience with representation. This act of collecting, she argues, gives us the illusion of possessing reality, a concept that resonates in the digital age, where social media users curate their lives through carefully selected images, often presenting an idealized version detached from everyday reality. Sontag further elaborates that photographs really are experience captured, and the camera is the ideal arm of consciousness in its acquisitive mood. To photograph, she contends, is to claim ownership over the thing photographed, establishing a relationship with the world that feels like knowledge and, therefore, like power. This acquisitive impulse is amplified in the digital era, where platforms like Instagram and Facebook enable billions to share their lives instantly, asserting control over their self-presentation while also subjecting themselves to algorithmic surveillance and social validation. Despite their authority, Sontag warns that photographs are not neutral. They are interpretations shaped by the photographer's choices. She contrasts photographs with paintings and prose, noting that while the latter are frankly interpretive, photographs are often treated as miniatures of reality that anyone can make or acquire. However, She argues that this perception is deceptive, as photographers impose standards on their subjects, as seen in the Farm Security Administration projects of the late 1930s, where photographers like Walker Evans and Dorothea Lange took dozens of shots to capture the right look to convey notions about poverty, dignity, and exploitation. This mediation, Sontag suggests, is both a strength and a limitation. Photographs can educate and inform, but they can also distort or oversimplify complex realities, a concern that is particularly relevant today with the rise of AI-generated images. These images, created without any basis in reality, challenge Sontag's notion of photography as a trace of the real, raising ethical questions about authenticity and misinformation. Sontag traces photography's historical evolution from a niche activity for the wealthy and obsessed in the 1840s to a democratic medium through industrialization. She notes that photography implied the capture of the largest possible number of subjects, a promise carried out by technological advancements that made cameras cheaper, lighter, and easier to use. This democratization has empowered individuals to document their lives and the world around them, aligning with her view that photography is a mass art form, practiced more as a social right than an artistic endeavor. However, Sontag warns of the insatiability of the photographing eye, suggesting that the proliferation of images can overwhelm our capacity to discern their significance, creating a kind of visual noise that obscures rather than clarifies reality. This concern is magnified in the digital age, where social media platforms enable the upload of nearly 2 billion photos daily, totaling approximately 657 billion images annually, raising questions about the ethical and aesthetic implications of such a vast visual archive. Sontag explores the dual nature of photography as both an art form and a tool for social control. On one hand, she acknowledges photographers like Alfred Stieglitz and Paul Strand, who composed images with aesthetic power, elevating photography to an art. On the other hand, she notes its role in surveillance and propaganda, from the Paris police's use in 1871 to round up communists to its modern applications in state control. This tension underscores photography's ambivalent role in modern society, a theme that resonates in today's discussions about privacy and consent on social media platforms. Sontag's views on the ethics of seeing are particularly pertinent in the digital age. She argues that photographs shape what we value and how we connect with the world, a process that is amplified by social networking, where images of distant events and cultures are instantly shared, often without context. This raises ethical questions about voyeurism, consent, and the commodification of suffering, issues Sontag addressed in her later work, regarding the pain of others. Her call for an ecology of images, where we manage the proliferation of photographs to preserve their meaning and ethical weight, remains an urgent challenge in our visually saturated world. This is especially relevant in the context of AI, where the potential for manipulation and misinformation threatens the integrity of photography as a truth-telling medium. Photography has become as commonplace as sex and dancing, no longer confined to the realm of art but instead functioning as a widespread social practice. She argues that for most people, photography is not practiced as an art but as a social right, a defense against anxiety, and a tool of power. This democratization, enabled by technological advancements, has made photography accessible to the masses, aligning with her view that it is a mass art form, practiced more as a social convention than an artistic endeavor. However, this shift raises concerns about the loss of photography's artistic integrity, suggesting a trivialization of its potential as a medium for deep expression. Sontag highlights photography's integral role in documenting family life, particularly through the creation of family albums that preserve memories and connections. She notes that cameras go with family life, with sociological studies showing households with children are twice as likely to have at least one camera, and not taking pictures of one's children can be seen as a sign of parental indifference. This practice, she argues, constructs a portrait chronicle of the family, a portable kit of images that bears witness to its connectedness, especially as the nuclear family is carved out of larger family aggregates. However, this reliance on photographs to memorialize family life also suggests a certain artificiality, where the image becomes a substitute for lived experience, reducing the complexity of relationships to a series of static moments. This critique resonates in the digital age, where family photo streams on social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook amplify this dynamic, often presenting an idealized version detached from everyday reality. Sontag connects photography to tourism, noting that taking pictures is not just about capturing memories but about validating one's presence in a place. She states, "Photographs will offer indisputable evidence that the trip was made, that the program was carried out, that fun was had," suggesting that photography serves as a way to certify experience. However, she critiques this tendency, arguing that it is also a way of refusing direct experience, by limiting experience to a search for the photogenic, by converting experience into an image, a souvenir. Travel, in this view, becomes a strategy for accumulating photographs, where the act of picture-taking becomes the primary goal rather than the experience itself. This insight is particularly relevant today, with social media encouraging users to document and share travel experiences for likes and comments, turning personal journeys into a currency of social approval. Sontag's critique raises questions about whether we're truly engaging with the world or merely capturing it for validation, a tension amplified by the ease of digital sharing. Sontag explores photography's psychological function as a defense against anxiety, particularly for those with a strong work ethic. She notes, "The very activity of taking pictures is soothing, and assuages general feelings of disorientation that are likely to be exacerbated by travel." For individuals handicapped by a ruthless work ethic, such as Germans, Japanese, and Americans, photography provides a task-like activity that mimics work, appeasing their anxiety about not being productive during leisure time. This insight reveals photography's role as a coping mechanism in a society that values productivity above all else, though it also hints at a deeper unease, a fear of being disconnected from purpose or meaning. In the digital age, this dynamic is amplified, as the constant pressure to document and share experiences on social media can be seen as a way to assuage anxieties about missing out or not living a notable life, reinforcing Sontag's view of photography as a psychological tool. Sontag observes that in societies undergoing rapid industrialization and cultural change, photography becomes a way to hold onto a sense of history and identity. She notes that people robbed of their past seem to make the most fervent picture takers, at home and abroad, citing the example of Americans and Japanese tourists in the 1970s, who were particularly avid photographers due to the traumatic break with their past. This compulsion to document everything reflects a broader cultural anxiety about loss and impermanence, where photographs serve as a way to anchor oneself in a rapidly changing world. This insight is echoed in contemporary discussions about digital archives, where social media photo streams act as modern equivalents of family albums, preserving memories in a world where physical and cultural landscapes are constantly shifting. Sontag critiques the voyeuristic nature of photography, arguing that it fosters a passive, detached relationship with the world. She states, "Taking photographs has set up a chronic voyeuristic relation to the world which levels the meaning of all events, suggesting that by turning all events into potential subjects for photographs, photography equalizes their importance, reducing the world to a series of consumable images." This voyeurism is inherently predatory, as she notes. To photograph people is to violate them, by seeing them as they never see themselves, by having knowledge of them they can never have. It turns people into objects that can be symbolically possessed. She likens the camera to a weapon, not in a literal sense but in its capacity to invade, trespass, and exploit, suggesting that photographing can feel like a soft murder, appropriate to a sad, frightened time. This critique raises ethical questions about privacy and objectification, particularly in the context of today's image-saturated world, where paparazzi and surveillance photography amplify these concerns. Sontag suggests that photography could serve as a less violent way to express aggression compared to using guns, though this might result in a world overwhelmed by images. She uses the example of photographic safaris in East Africa, where cameras replace rifles, symbolizing a shift from destruction to preservation. This suggests photography can channel human impulses in a less harmful way, but it also raises concerns about the sheer volume of images, which might desensitize us. Photography is a nostalgic and melancholic art form, where photographs evoke feelings of longing and sadness. They capture moments that highlight mortality, like a beautiful subject that has aged or no longer exists, making every photo a reminder of time's passage. This emotional power can connect us to the past, but it might also intensify feelings of loss. Photography emerged during times of rapid change, allowing us to document what is disappearing, such as vanished cities or altered landscapes. Sontag compares this to family albums preserving memories of deceased loved ones, suggesting photographs are crucial for maintaining a connection to the past in a constantly changing world. This role is vital, but it might also idealize what is lost, potentially distorting our understanding. Photographs can evoke desire or moral awareness, but their impact depends on context. For moral influence, they must be tied to specific historical situations, like Civil War images affecting public opinion. Without a relevant political consciousness, photographs of atrocities might feel unreal or overwhelming, highlighting debates about their role in driving social change. Sontag compares still photographs to moving images, suggesting that stills may be more memorable because they capture a single moment rather than a continuous flow. Television presents a stream of images that can blur together, whereas a photograph isolates a specific instant that can be revisited, turned into a slim object that one can keep and look at again. She cites the iconic photograph of a napalm-burned Vietnamese child during the Vietnam War, which likely had a greater effect on public opinion than extensive television coverage of atrocities, emphasizing the power of a single, defined moment to evoke emotion and drive change. This comparison underscores the unique impact of still photography in shaping memory and moral awareness, though it also raises questions about the relative influence of different media forms in the digital age. Ideology determines what constitutes an event worthy of being photographed, asserting that an event must first be named and characterized before it can be evidenced by photographs. Photography does not create events but identifies them after they have been defined, suggesting that its contribution always follows the naming of the event. She imagines that if Americans had seen photographic evidence of the devastation in Korea during the Korean War, they might have been less supportive, but such photographs were not available because there was no ideological space for them, unlike in Vietnam, where images of suffering were more readily accessible due to the war being framed as a colonial conflict. This highlights the dependency of photography's moral impact on existing political narratives, with debates about its role in driving social change continuing to be relevant.